All right. Good evening, everyone, and thanks for joining us on today's edition on True Talk with Sam. We're currently live here on Zoom and also on YouTube. Thank you very much. If this is your first time for joining the program, you're welcome to True Talk with Sam. So basically, it's a monthly talk series and a knowledge sharing and information session on how to settle in and adapt well in the UK. And also, we have a session where we listen to the journeys of internationally educated nurses who have migrated here to the UK. And as I said, we are live here on Zoom and also on YouTube. So please, if you've not subscribed to my YouTube channel, please go over to YouTube to subscribe to True Talk with Sam. Without wasting much of your time, this month we have quite an interesting topic to discuss today, handling racism at the workplace. That's our topic for today. And we have no other person than someone who have fought and won the fight against racism, Kemi Akinmeji. And I would be reading her bibliography shortly, so you actually know who Kemi is. So, Kemi, can you please put on your camera so we would see your face? Thank you very much, Kemi.
Hello.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
So I would be introducing Kemi shortly before I hand over the platform to her. Olukemi Akinmeji was born in Washington, D.C. in United States. She was raised in Nigeria and she relocated back to the U.S. after her high school in 1994. Kemi joined the U.S. Navy as an active duty sailor, working in healthcare for 8 years and an additional year in the U.S. Navy Reserve. Kemi started her nursing training in the U.S. in 2003 and she relocated to the U.K. in 2005 and she joined the NHS in 2006 as a maternity support worker. In 2009, Kemi applied for direct entry military program where she graduated with a BSc honors in 2013. And Kemi has worked in several hospitals, both as a substantive staff and an agency staff in the southeast of England. Kemi recently worked as a private midwife for 4 years in London, and currently she has been appointed as a Band 7 midwife for multi-ethnic empowerment, and she's looking forward to step into that role. Please, ladies and gentlemen, I have Olukemi Akinmeji currently with us. Thank you, Kemi, for joining us today, and I think I would allow you to do justice to this topic.
Thank you so much for having me.
All right.
Thank you very much for having me. It's a privilege to be here. Um, I am by no means a specialist or expert on racism, but it's an honor to be here, and I'm happy to share my experience and also talk about how we can navigate racism in the NHS. Um, I'll start by letting you know that my experience in the NHS has been good so far. I mean, I can't honestly say that all through the time I've been in the NHS, which has been 18 years so far, that it's all been maxed with racism all through. No. It's just over the years, I think it's just become something a bit more rampant. I'm not sure if it's because of the workload. I'm not sure if it's because people are becoming a bit more bolder. They're becoming bolder to speak up, and obviously, we need to hear about it and tackle it. Talking about my personal experience, I would like to share um, my slide, and that's in itself would be where I'll be coming from in terms of discussing my experience and talking about how we can navigate. I think that's what it is. Yeah. Okay. Can I see my slide? Can everyone see my slide?
Yes, we can.
Can you see my slide?
Yes, we can. If you could just enlarge
Okay,
it,
good.
so
Would that do?
yes. Basically, I think there's a button just before the you see 64%. If you scroll move down before that, there's a button there that you could. Yes, that one exactly. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, so next slide. Okay, so I'm just going to start by talking about what racism is. And I think we all know that it comes in different forms. Direct racism in terms of direct discrimination towards a particular person, indirect discrimination, harassment, or victimization. I believe most of us on here are healthcare professionals. We've been through trainings and we know exactly what they all are. So I don't need to start going into definition. Okay, so in my experience of racism, and this is not tiny down to just one trust, this just happens to be the one where I went to tribunal and everyone obviously knows my case. Some of the, and this is not obviously all the reasons that were presented, this is just a few I've tried to put together. The first one was unfair workload, that my colleagues and I, not just myself, there were only 3 Black midwives at the time working at the trust within the hospital. So it was a bit difficult for us because there were times when we would talk about the workload allocation. At times we tend to work together on the same shift. Most of the time we don't. But when we do compare notes, we find that half the time when we look at the board, we do know beforehand the patient we're going to be getting, down to the fact that we get the heavier workload on the board. It even became a joke between myself and one of the doctors who was of ethnic minority, where it comes around during handover. When we finish handover, he says, "You're going to get that patient." And of course, I end up getting the patient. There are times when I decide not to say anything, but there are times when I do have to speak up. One of the occasions was presented in court where I was assigned 3 patients, but this is because the coordinator at the time was being very impartial, and it was very clear that she was being impartial. She told the team to pick what they wanted, and I could tell that she was being very impartial, not to want to allocate to a particular person what she thought was appropriate. They call it the skill mix. Skill mix doesn't necessarily mean that the junior midwife shouldn't learn from taking difficult patients, because that's the only way they can learn. What she did was she said, "Okay, I'm going to give it to you guys to pick what you want." A newly qualified midwife said, "Oh, I don't want a laborer." So she decided she was going to let her pick who she wanted. She took a daycare patient. By the time it came to my turn, okay, I said, "Okay, I would like that patient." I chose the patient I wanted. But then when she decided to go on the board, she said, "You know what? I'm going to allocate, because at this point, I won't have any midwife to take some of the other patients." Then she went on to assign me to 3 patients. Of those 3 patients, for those midwives on the call right now, induction of labor patient that is already a bishop score of 6, that needed pain relief because she was already going into active labor. Another patient who had a raised, well, her BMI was 61 at the time, but that wasn't even the issue. The issue was she had actually gone into labor because she was being induced, and she went on to have hyperstimulation. She was given the first dose of terbutaline. So by the time we had the handover, I was actually supposed to be seeing her, and obviously they need to review her for the second terbutaline because she was hyperstimulating. And the third one was a patient that had just come out of delivery and was a PET, preeclampsia. and she wasn't stable enough to be sent. She wasn't stable enough to be sent to the postnatal ward. So I was assigned those 3 patients. Now, I didn't understand how she decided to allocate this because at the end of the day, I couldn't divide myself into 3 places. So what I did was I said to her, I think this workload is actually unfair because I can't divide myself into 3 places. And each of these women actually need a midwife one-to-one. So I said I was going to have to prioritize, and that's what I did. I prioritized and I took the hyperstimulating lady. I went in to make sure she was comfortable and I told her I'll be right back. I went into the other 2 patients and I said, I've been assigned to 2 other patients, but I will come to you whenever I get the time. And I wrote in the notes. And that was the saving grace, really, because I documented in each patient's notes. And I went back to take that hyperstimulation lady. Anyway, that is just to cover the type of workload that we've been assigned as the ethnic minority in the group. And I was the only Black midwife on shift at the time. Another example is preferential treatment when it comes to breaks. An incident occurred. It happens over time, but there was a particular incident that occurred where I was on shift with MCA who happens to be Black. My break is not dependent on the MCA's break, but if I'm sent on a break with an MCA, that's absolutely fine. We went on a break together and normally we'll be given a place to go. So we were given the rooms to go. We went into the room. An hour later, they came to knock on the door and asked us to come back from our break, which is fine. We allocated an hour. That's what is on paper. But funny enough, everybody else that went on break, because they sent us on break first, every other person that went on break after that ended up having extended break of an hour and a half. But that wasn't even the issue at first. The issue was that as soon as we came back from our break, I was reassigned to another patient, and she was assigned to go to another ward to help out. The patient I was assigned to was actually brought from the antenatal ward, which was fine. But what I found was that everybody else that were not going to be going on break after me had been sitting there chatting, shopping online. But when I came back from my break, I was assigned to go take a patient from another ward. The MCA that was assigned to go to a postnatal ward, of course, she could have joined the other MCA and just relaxed herself because we had actually worked before we went on break. She found it offensive, and of course, she decided to say something. That same patient, that same midwife, that same MCA, who is the next point on the line, the Black colleague that had a bank shift cancelled after speaking up. After she spoke up about it to the matron, actually, she did tell me she was going to go to the matron. I told her if she wanted to, that's absolutely fine. The only complaint I could have made was that the extended breaks was unfair because I was given an hour. But we're allocated an hour officially. There's no need to complain about the hour being given. But when she went to complain about being obviously singled out to go to another ward when the other colleagues were sitting around and doing their own thing, the next time I spoke to her, she contacted me and said all her bank sheets were cancelled after she spoke up about that. I am the sort of person that really wants to get to the bottom of things. I don't just assume. So I didn't want to assume that the reason why her bank sheet was cancelled was because she spoke out. So I contacted the matron at the time and I said, I wanted to talk to her about the MCA. And I said, she made a complaint and I could actually testify because both of us were sent on the break at the same time. And that actually was what happened. And when we came back, everybody else were just sitting around chatting. And I was reassigned to someone that's been waiting on the antenatal ward that could have been brought over by any of one of those midwives. And she was actually sent to another ward to help out when she could have actually joined the other colleagues that were just sitting around. The matron said that wasn't the reason why her bank shift was cancelled. That it was cancelled because there had too many people on shift. Now, if you're going to cancel a person's shift, maybe 1 or 2, you don't cancel all the shifts, all the bank shifts. Anyway, as far as I know, up until my case came on to be heard, she never went back because she just felt that was unfair treatment, which I agree, it was unfair treatment. There was another occasion where I was on shift with another Black colleague who was a permanent staff, and then the agency staff who also happens to be Black. We only had one patient on the board on labor ward. And at the time, the person that was on the board had been assigned to another white midwife. The other colleagues of ours were allowed to just stay around and do whatever they wanted to do on labor ward. While the coordinator said the three of us, myself, the permanent midwife, and the agency midwife, should go to another ward and help out. The ward was the postnatal ward. When we got there, we realized that they had more than enough staff, and they really didn't need us. The other midwife, the permanent midwife, actually spoke up about it. At the time, because I was quite new, I didn't really want to make a fuss. And at the time, to be honest, I really didn't think it was based on us being Black, because I thought maybe because we all got along well. It wasn't until later on that I realized, no, this is actually becoming an habitual thing. That was another incident. There was another occasion where a Black midwife, a white midwife, took ill on the ward. And when she took ill, she was taken into one of the labor ward rooms, and she was treated by one of the doctors. She was cannulated, given IV fluids, and as soon as she felt, several hours later after she woke up, felt better, the coordinator assigned one of the MCAs to take her home, to drive her home. Now, it just so happens that down the road, I happened to take Hill. While I was at work, I became quite dizzy. And when I slumped, I was asked to obviously go to A&E to be checked out. The person that took me to A&E was one of my Eastern European midwife, who was very lovely. When she took me there, she said she was happy to stay with me until a family member came, because a family member had to come to drive me back home. But unfortunately, the coordinator called and said she needed to return to the ward. Now, when she returned to the ward, she now later said to me that there was no reason to have been called, because when she got to the ward, they were just sitting around, just having chats. And they could have actually seen to the patient who was an induction of labor that just needed to be put on the CTG. Somebody else could have seen to that patient, and they could have allowed her to support me. But of course, they didn't allow her to do that. I actually spoke about this, and I said something to my matron again about why was my white colleague treated on the labor ward. A member of staff drove her home in the middle of the night. And when I took Hill early hours of the morning after a night shift, I wasn't even allowed the support of a colleague. She said by the time the information got to her, there was nothing she could have done about it. She didn't agree with the way the white colleague was treated on the ward, and that was the end of it. Again, another incident where a white colleague was handpicked to, actually not even one, it was an habitual thing, where the white colleagues are handpicked to shadow shifts. When I say shadow shifts, I mean when a person is looking to advance from a band 6 to a band 7. Normally, you would have to prove yourself that you can do the work by obviously going to interview, passing the interview, and then shadow to obviously be able to do the role. But what we find as a Black midwives, like I said, there are only 3 of us. What we find is that quite a lot of times, the white colleagues are always handpicked, and they start to shadow the coordinator. So we're all aware that in about a month or 2, however long, when they put out the work, when they put out the job, that person obviously will get the job. So that's always the way it's been. And of course, when I spoke up about this as well, I said, listen, I haven't applied for a band 7 role, but my other 2 colleagues that were there, they've been qualified long before me, very well experienced. They said they have tried, but obviously they never do get the post. They were never successful when they do apply. One of the Black midwives, actually, I meant to say, the one that, the second one that went with me to the other ward of the 3 midwives, when we went to the postnatal ward to help out, she did say to me that the reason why she was upset about us being singled out is because she had had an incident before where she complained about racism. And when it was investigated, she was told that she didn't have enough evidence. And the same coordinator was the same one that handpicked us to go to the postnatal ward. So this issue of actually being treated as if we're not necessarily welcome enough to be listened to didn't just start with me. When she appealed her case, she was actually told there still wasn't substantial evidence to obviously take it forward. And it wasn't until during my trial that I found out that she was actually warned that if she brought up another complaint of racism that wasn't substantiated, she would be disciplined. So, of course, it's like giving someone a gag order. So she wasn't able to make any more complaints after that. So I found myself having to speak up when I started to notice these things, because obviously, by the time I found out what she had gone through before I joined the trust, I realized that was what was actually going on. Some departments, obviously, when you go to a maternity ward, you have different departments. I find that some departments don't even have a ethnic minority because it's mainly white staff that works there. The reason why that is racism, selective membership, I don't know. But that's another thing that we've noticed. A white colleague actually told me when we had an argument once, she brought a patient over. I told her, obviously, you need to complete what you need to do on the patient to hand over. She told me, I don't like you. You need to go back to where you came from. Now, again, these are the kind of things, these are the kind of languages that we get from our white colleagues sometimes. And it's really difficult not to take it personal, because when these things are said to us as ethnic minorities, I'm not sure if you're trying to tell me to go back to the previous trust I came from, or you're trying to tell me to go back to where I originally come from. But it's still not very nice language to receive as a Black midwife working in the NHS. A workforce that is so diverse that we should actually be sensitive to each other and be welcoming. There was an incident where one of the doctors, and this is where I have to say, it's very common in the NHS, where when you have a pack of staff that come together as friends, group of friends in a workplace, once you offend one, you seem to offend all of them. And this was the case when one of the white doctors that I worked with, that was quite good friends with a coordinator that I called out before for calling a agency doctor useless during handover. And she thought it was funny because everybody else was laughing. After handover, I went to her and I said, I didn't quite like that. Because if you have a problem with his qualifications or how competent he was, you probably should talk to his consultants. But to be calling him useless in handover, and everybody was there laughing, including students' midwives, I found it very uncomfortable. She said she didn't mean anything by it. Said she was just trying to say that he's not very helpful doctor. Still, I didn't think that was the right way to express our concerns about the doctor. Anyway, that didn't make me popular, obviously. One of the senior doctors, that a registrar for that matter, that was on shift with me, who was friends with her, I think everybody by this time knew that I speak up when I see things like that. I asked her to review a patient that was already considered septic. If you have a septic lady that was in labor, and we're treating her obviously at the time, she started to have rigors. And of course, she was concerned, her partner was concerned. I was concerned as a midwife. The CTG was actually still okay, and I asked her to come and review. And what she simply said to me was, are you concerned about the CTG? I said, no. But she needs to be reviewed because she's now becoming very unwell. She said she will come. She didn't come. I escalated to the coordinator on shift. She went to her. She pretty much dismissed her as well and said, I'll come when I'm ready. Now, I'll kind of skip everyone that went to her. About 3-4 people went to her. By the time I escalated to another senior midwife that was on shift, who was a coordinator, I said, I need you to come into my room and fresh eyes and then tell me what you think. By the time she came, she said, I'm going to put on my big girl's panties, exactly her words, and get her out here to review. By the time she went to review the patient, she said, she needs to get the doctor out. By the time the doctor came out, she was effing and blinding at me, right in front of everybody in the hallway. I was upset, but I can compose myself, and I did. And I didn't say a word. By the time she was done, she slammed a C-section pack on the table and said, tell me what the F you want me to put down the indication. It's a bit too much for me, da 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 da. And then she stormed off the ward and went to have a cigarette. By the time she came back, she said she was ready to review. She went to review the patient. The patient ended up being sectioned. She was treated for sepsis several days later. She was discharged with her baby. Glad everything went well. Now, the thing is, I find that as a Black midwife, if I've been too timid to ask a doctor to review a patient that was concerning, I am putting myself on the line. I'm putting my pin on the line. And not just that, I'm putting the patient's safety on the line. Because there are two patients there, the woman and the baby. In a trust where you need to almost say a prayer before you ask for a review from a doctor, I don't think an ethnic minority like myself would have survived. Keep in mind, there are a whole lot of us on the NMC, and there's a good reason for that. If you get that kind of treatment where you can't even ask for a review, if something had happened to that patient, that would have been me on the line because she would have denied being asked to come and review that patient. The good thing is I always document, and I documented every step of the way. Each person I sent her to go review, I always say to them, I've already asked her to review, but she said she was tired and she needed to sleep. Another incident happened where a patient told my colleague, my other Black colleague, that she didn't want her to be a midwife. She didn't understand why, and she asked why. The patient said she just didn't want her. So when the coordinator was told and she asked her to go find out why she didn't want her to look after her, the patient simply said she didn't understand her accent. I feel as if this is another form of racism where we all speak English. We might have different accents. At the end of the day, we all brought up from different areas. Even in the UK, we have the Northerners, we have the Southerners. We all have different accents. But for a patient to say this, and the coordinator just simply said, "That's fine," and changed the midwife, I thought that was very unacceptable. But that's another thing that we do experience in this line of work. During my experience, like I said, I've always reported the incidents, have most of it, to my manager. I thought at the time I'd become quite close enough to her where I could go to her when I had concerns, especially when I spoke to her about the reason why the MCS shift was cancelled. I mean, she was just a colleague, but I felt comfortable enough to approach her and say, I didn't understand why this was done to this lady. And then when she looked into it, she just came back and gave me the reason she gave. Now, this same manager actually said she didn't know the reason why I was resigning, but she had several months of me going to her over and over again about the reason why I felt uncomfortable. There were times when I even cried in her office. There were times when she even shed a tear with me because she felt she could actually see it happening, but she was helpless. Was exactly what she said to me one of the times in our office. Said she felt helpless because she didn't know what else to do. Now, that same manager decided that the best way to find out about racial discrimination, I guess, or talk about it, was to attend the Christmas party for the department and question his senior colleague. I didn't understand why, because by this time I'd actually resigned. I'd already turned in my resignation. I said, you know what, I'm just going to move on to another trust. So by the time she went to the Christmas party and discussed this, I later on found out. When I found out, It was from another colleague that said she heard during the Christmas party that the reason for me resigning was because of racism, that she hoped she hasn't been one of those that has made me feel that way. I felt bad. Because in as much as there were quite a handful of midwives that were like that, there were also some midwives that were really kind, caring, and I would really have hated to offend because they were actually very kind ones. So I did say to her, yes, that was the reason I was resigning. But I wasn't expecting my matron of all people to be discussing me at the Christmas party. That was another one. On the very last day, when I was leaving, mind you, when I did turn in my resignation, I sent an email to the deputy head of midwifery and the midwifery head of midwifery, and I stated my concerns. The concern stems from being treated differently, to the way we're being talked to obviously to being scared to approach some doctors because we're just not equal enough to speak to them, to the way doctors, foreign doctors that come on shifts are being treated, to midwives' conduct, coming to work, showing, some explicit pictures of themselves or partners and stuff like that. I mean, just bad behavior in the workplace that will make anybody uncomfortable. So I knew that by this time, everybody knew that I'd make that complaint. And obviously, I was resigning for that reason. So one of the midwives that decided to take a last dig at me, who I'd had issues with anyways, coming into my room when I asked for help, turned off my CTG and said, well, you're not bothered now, are you? There's no reason to be concerned about the CTG when there's these cells and you're about to deliver. I thought there are better ways to actually impact some knowledge. It wasn't to that extent. Another example, she will say what she considered a joke. She will say something that almost borders line to where you come from, that kind of a thing. She's been suspended for bullying before, but it didn't seem to have worked. I don't think that's taught her any lessons because this same person that I worked with all night and didn't say anything to me, knowing it was my last shift, decided to stand in the hallway and say, it's Kemi's last day, everyone check your bags. I've never been accused of stealing before. No one has even said anything to me before. I've never had any incident where anyone said anything was missing around me before. I thought if that was a joke, it is joke in bad taste. And I didn't understand why. There's been some comments and obviously, like I said, some remarks when I obviously identify as Nigerians and we talk about how there are a lot of criminal activities amongst Nigerians, 419 and the rest of it. Yes, I can own that happens in Nigeria. But does that mean every Nigerian is a thief? So of course, when she said that, again, I controlled myself. I didn't say anything. But I knew that was personal. My reason for leaving the trust, I'd already made clear. I was happy to leave. But that statement I took personal. And that's why I decided to go forward with making a complaint. The complaint I made was not because of that single statement. It was because of the habitual behavior. And I just felt like as midwives, as healthcare professionals, we should do better. Because if you treat your colleagues that way because of their ethnicity or background, I wonder what you're doing behind closed doors with your patients. When you look at the statistics of how many ethnic minorities experience and are still experiencing bad care, it's because we have some healthcare professionals that are not really aware of their own self-biases. And their biases really flows into their work, their attitude, their work ethics, and the way they treat their patients that are obviously not white. Also because our white patients would know to make complaints, formal complaints, but our Black patients, most of them do not know to make complaints. The few that do make complaints, I'm not sure if it goes any far. Anyway, I'll carry on to when we were in court. The lawyer was good enough to ask the right questions, only to find out that the response I got from the trust when I made the complaint and they investigated and came back to tell me that this midwife was sorry for her behavior and she's been reprimanded and she's been told that if she does that again, she would be punished severely. In court, we now later on found out that she was never reprimanded. I was told that she was sent to unconscious bias class, only for her to say she was never sent to unconscious bias class, and she was never even told she was going to be disciplined. So, which means that they sent me an outcome of the investigation because I gave them a chance to, only to find out that they never did anything about it, just swept it under the rug. But they weren't expecting me to take it further because by the time I got the response from them, I realized that wasn't good enough. And that's why I sought advice from the RCM and I was advised to take it to the tribunal. And that's what I did. Now, understand the HR rep did apologize. And at the time, I felt she was sincere because by the time she listened to everyone that came on the stand, I didn't call any witnesses. Funny enough, I spoke for myself. And I had, I think, about 9 members of staff sat on the witness stand. And the only thing they could say was that I was a good midwife. However, they thought I taunted somebody about her weight. And the reason why they behaved towards me that way was because they thought I was taunting someone about the weight. A comment that was made between 2 midwives, they were having friendly banter, was turned into an accusation of fat shaming. But by the time the HR rep got on stand, she apologized, especially when she found out that the lie about reprimanding that person had come to light that didn't happen because she didn't take accountability for that anyway. She did say she didn't know, that's what she was told. Now, what I will say about racism in the workplace, having experienced all this, I wouldn't have gone this far with my case if I didn't have a union. My union at the time, they were very helpful in getting me legal representation. However, the first time I actually went to the union and I asked for representation, they did say they will only take a case that they have over, I think, 51% chance of winning. I was confident in my case and I decided to self-litigate. But somewhere along the line, I got representation and that was through the union. So my first advice to you is this: when you join the NHS or any other workforce, please join the union. Don't assume that every action is racially motivated, because just like the judge said, it was a toxic working environment. There were some toxic people that I had to put up with, and my colleagues had to put up with, but she didn't see every action as being racist. The ones that were being racist were called out. So sometimes you might have to ask questions. You might have to explore more to see why some people behave the way they do. They might just be unhappy. They might just be mean. And they might just be bullies, like that colleague of mine was. Don't assume your work colleagues are your friends. A lot of times we go to work and we want to make friends with our colleagues. It is nice to make friends. It's an advantage when you work with people that you can actually call friends. Yes, but be careful. As Africans, we joke, we have banters. There's an agency midwife who I get on with quite a lot, and for a while, the way we talk, the way we play around. One of my work colleagues actually said she really admires us because we really get on well. However, if you decide to have banters like that with your white colleagues, you might be surprised that the reception might be different from what you expect from your African colleagues because they're not used to that. a joke, a banter about, oh, what are you eating, was what was turned into fat shaming, which at the time I didn't even think it was fat shaming. So just be careful. Be respectful of the laws and the cultures of the land, because at the end of the day, we're all brought up with different values and different cultures. So I'll say, please be careful. What is acceptable to you might not be acceptable to somebody else. I think it's actually right to speak up. But sometimes some people say, just be quiet. Don't say nothing. I had an Asian midwife actually say to me, oh, there's a lot going on here. There's a lot going on here. You know, a lot of people are, really racist, and they treat us differently. We see it, we know it, but just ignore it. Just do your work. I had one of my black doctors that actually said to me, oh, I see it is going on. And yes, it is quite subtle. They do it in a very subtle way. I see it going on, but I don't say anything. I just overlook it. But what I find is that when you keep quiet, it is keeping the peace, yes, but it just steals your peace, because you spend more time at work, you spend more hours at work than you do in your own home. And you find that slowly but surely you start losing yourself, because you come to work anxious, you come to work not knowing what is going to come next. I would advise, if you're experiencing this kind of behavior, any kind of racist behavior, please keep a diary. I don't have a physical diary. I keep everything digital. Just jot down the time, the dates, what happened. It's almost like a quick reflection. Even if you're not going to do anything about it at the time, just make a note of it, and make a note of the people that were there, that witnessed it. If you make any verbal complaint to anyone, please follow it up with an email. If you say something about what had happened to you, what you've experienced, follow it up with an email. That email is all you have. When I went to court, my only saving grace, the reason why I could represent myself, well, the reason why I could speak up for myself and not even ask for witnesses to come forward, is because a lot of what was going on, I was following up with email to my manager. I spoke to you about this. What are you going to do about this? Have you spoken to this person about the behavior? Have you done this? And a lot of things that happened at the time could not be explained away. So obviously, I knew the behavior was wrong. So I was persistent in trying to get some sort of resolve, but there was not going to be one. So that's why it was easy for me to be able to say, yes, you knew about it. You might have said you couldn't do anything about it, but you knew about it to her. Any racist remark, any racist action, report it immediately, because the minute you overlook it and say, oh, yeah, I can ignore it. I get it all the time. We get it on the street, so we can get it at work. No, it's unacceptable. Such behavior do not belong in the workplace. It has no place in the NHS, because the NHS is diverse. There are too many of us all around, so we need to be accepting of each other. When you complain, when you make a complaint, you might find that it will be swept under the rug if you don't ask for a time frame. Always ask for a time frame for a feedback. A complaint needs to be followed with action, or actually feedback of what they found when they investigated. Don't just leave it open. Understand the difference between mediation and facilitated conversation. When you're called into mediation, unfortunately, you cannot take anyone to support you, because it's considered private. If you do not feel comfortable going for mediation, please ask for a facilitated conversation where you can get someone to support you. And in that situation, you can both speak openly. And whoever is going to support you can actually say one or two things to support you if you're being too emotional, or if you're having a rough time just expressing yourself. I would honestly advise you to not just have a union rep, but look outside, look beyond. Because sometimes the union reps, I don't know if it's being timid or if it's just the elephant in the room every time you mention race. No one wants to address the elephant in the room when it comes to that. So race is really difficult to address, difficult to speak about. Go to the Citizens Advice Bureau. At the most, contact ACAS. They're very helpful. This comes to the elephant in the room that I talked about. If you feel discriminated against, don't tiptoe around it. I've said that before. It's not going to make it go away. It's just going to keep happening. Use the trust values and discrimination policy. Use it to make your case and hold the trust accountable. Do not take any patient, and I have to stress this, please do not take any patient identifying record home with you. If you have to take any information home in order to build a case, please redact the patient's information and just use their initials. I cannot stress it enough. The employment tribunal application is time sensitive for you that do not know. So if you want to take a case to tribunal, when you're sure you want to take a case to tribunal, please make sure you file your case on time within 3 months of the incident. At the time I resigned, I didn't even consider it a discriminatory resignation. In other words, I didn't see it as being forced to resign. I just thought, I've had enough now, I'm moving on. It wasn't until after I contacted my RCM rep that she told me, no, that's not actually right. And filing a case on time was dependent on the outcome of their investigation when I made the complaints. But they knew the time sensitivity, which I didn't. So by the time they gave me the result of their investigation, it was 6 months after I made the complaints. So they knew what they were doing. The same way when I was in court, I asked for the patient's document, the patient's notes as evidence of what has transpired between myself and obviously the doctors. And of course, I was told they couldn't supply the patient's notes. They couldn't make it available. That sounds to me like a trust that has something to cover. So if they have something to hide, of course, they're going to cover it up. So they didn't make it available. Again, know your rights when it comes to taking a case to tribunal. If you're being affected mentally, anxiety, depression, loss of concentration at work because one issue or the other, race or any other issue is coming up, please take time off. Speak to your manager and take time off. Don't be caught out. Don't make a mistake and then later on say, oh yeah, I was distracted by this X, Y, and Z. There are too many of us on the NMC hearing. Doesn't need to be so. And don't hesitate to seek support from your colleagues. I put this slide in as a fight or flight only because I can't stress how physically, mentally, and psychologically exhausting this case was. It went on for 3 years of collecting evidence, talking to lawyers back and forth. Like I said, I was self-litigating until about a month to me going to court when I finally escalated my complaints or my concern to a rep that made, I think it was the RCM. She had done an article in the RCN about racism, how the union was trying to help and how they've been very supportive. I responded to that and I said, no, that's not my experience. And I told her my experience, and this person was able to go back to the RCM and ask for legal support for me. And that's when I got the support a month before the trial. It's a lonely walk. If you're not prepared for it, please don't start it because it is quite draining. If you have the support, family, friends, worship leaders, people you can lean on for support, then please consider tapping into that support. Access a freedom to speak up guardian. Every trust should have one. I believe every trust should have one. So one is in your trust. Speak to them. They keep everything confidential. They're very supportive. I never spoke to any of them, but I've heard that they're very supportive. Don't be discouraged by the negative answer. Like I said, I got a negative from the RCM at first because they didn't think they could win the case. The case was actually in two parts. The first one was the case management, where I had to represent myself and speak to the judge about the reason why I filed the claim outside the timeline. At the time, I just had to be honest and tell her the reason why. And I was lucky enough that she thought there was enough evidence to take to tribunal. So even if you get a negative answer, keep persevering. If you believe in your case well enough, then please take it forward. Working away is an option. I've always said that. Not everyone is strong mentally. Not everyone is able to take on the issue of race or unfair treatment in the workplace, bullying and harassment, victimization. Not everyone is mentally capable of taking it on. If you're not mentally capable of taking it on, please walk away. Because at the end of the day, there's an increase in healthcare workers committing suicide. We don't want that for ourselves. Please, if you cannot take it on, walk away. Don't lose focus on the reason why you've joined this profession. It's a caring profession, it's a kind profession. Please, stay focused. And lastly, I would say please join your national diaspora group. I didn't know of my national diaspora group when I was going through this. I walked the path alone. But now that I do, I see that there's tremendous help and there's a lot of support you can tap into. They're out there. If you do not know who they are or where they are, seek the right channel, go to the right people, ask them, especially the ones that has been in the NHS long enough, they would know. The national statistics of midwives, and I'm saying midwives, I know there are nurses on this call, I'm sorry, but I can only talk about midwives. The national statistics of midwives in London that are actually facing disciplinary proceedings, that is the number right there. Black midwives make up 32% of the workforce in London, but yet 60% of them are facing disciplinary proceedings. And this statistics was from 2011, and that's Unison 2016. The same goes for the NMC, which obviously we have nurses as well on the NMC. If you look at the number of people on the NMC, most of them are ethnic minorities. We need to be careful. When you have unnecessary or discriminatory actions against a Black worker, most of the time, it is often an indication of poor management, most of the time. Because if it's addressed at a really minimal level, when you make the reports, there wouldn't be any incident of tribunal taking to trial. If you have a good manager, they will take care of you. So seek help from your manager first. Start from ethnic minorities, as it states on there, are more likely to experience discriminatory processes. And that's an NHS England publication for 2023, just last year. So it still acknowledges that ethnic minority staff are more likely to face disciplinary actions. So please, my colleagues, I can't stress it enough. Take care of yourselves. Speak up when you're experiencing these things. Keeping quiet doesn't make it go away. Speak up. And if you can't, like I said, please walk away. And that's all I have for you. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much, Kemi. Quite an emotional session, I must say. I was jotting, I was scribbling, and I know a lot of us have questions. I would open the floor to questions here on Zoom, and we have some colleagues watching on YouTube. Those on YouTube, please, can you type your questions and I'll read it out from here. Please, if you do have a question, can you show by raise of hand, please? And while we wait for some questions, Kemi, you talked about the roles of the union. I know we have the ROCN and we have the ROCM. And sometimes, just as you talked about them not taking your case because probably they have to take a case that they are 51% sure of winning. How did that go with you? Where did you get the strength or where did you get the motivation to self-litigate? Because I haven't heard about that.
Well, at the time, I actually thought it was going to be as simple as just going to the RCM, because the RCM rep was the person that actually supported me in the first place. Because initially I was just going to report the incident, and she said, "Listen, that is not right. That is actually what she called it. In terms of dismissal, she said it was I've forgotten the terminology now. But anyway, she now advised me to take it to tribunal. I expected that was going to be clear enough to get representation. So by the time the case was now going to go to tribunal, and she put it forward for legal representation, and the Thompsons said they will only take cases, and actually it's on their website. I didn't realize that they will only take cases that they have a higher chance of winning. I didn't understand it considering all the evidences I had, but I was so I think I was motivated because I was so bent on trying to clear my name and also trying to bring this to the attention of the trust, that I thought my colleagues are still there. They're still experiencing the same thing. When you go to a trust where the black staff that turns up there experience this and they leave, you find that nothing is going to be done. So I felt compelled to represent myself in spite of not having a good representation. I think that was my motivation. I needed to make it clear to them that the practice needs to stop, the bullying needs to stop, the racial discrimination among staff and even senior colleagues needed to stop.
Thank you very much. That was really motivating, I must say. While we await some questions from people, I would say uh, I see the reasons why you're talking about if you don't have the mental strength, just walk away. Because you talked about this going on for like 3 years. And financial wise, I don't know if you got support from anybody or if there was any union or there was, how did you fund chasing or fighting this stuff?
When I say 3 years, keep in mind when I resigned in 2020. When I resigned, I walked into another job. I was working, and when I say self litigate, I was working and responding to the trust lawyers, the trust legal team, asking for paperwork and you need to supply this, I need to supply this, and ask them for the evidence I needed as well. This was something I was doing. I didn't stop working. I was doing it alongside working full time. The trust I was working for, I didn't take it there. I didn't initially take it there to say, oh yeah, I'm doing this, I'm doing that. No, I kept it quite private. My manager at the time, she was supportive because she knew I told her about it. Um, she knew what was happening, but I still kept it quiet. It wasn't until the outcome of the hearing when it went out in the media, which I wasn't even expecting that to happen. But obviously, I was told that when a case like that comes up and they put it out in the media, it wasn't until it came out in the media did my colleagues find out. So it wasn't me telling them, it was just something they found out. In terms of finances, I was getting obviously my normal pay from working full time. It was just the time it took to keep responding back and forth to their legal team and myself.
Thank you very much, Kemi. Do we have any question from the house? This is the opportunity to ask Kemi any question. Go to YouTube to see. All right, there's a comment here for Kemi, saying, Kemi, you are really a star, and I admire your courage.
Thank you.
That's come from someone. All right, and I would ask a question. Apparently, I know this still goes on in some trust, and at least you've given us some tips on how to handle this. Now we sometimes I will be blunt here. Sometimes the managers are the ones who are uh, being racist or having some racial discrimination or something, and you run to probably most trusts also have this Black Asian minority ethnic group, and where you also turn to. But sometimes when you don't get such answers that you need and you really don't really know where to turn to. You also talked about freedom to speak up, and you find out that probably sometimes or most times those who are in the freedom to speak up or have freedom to speak up guardians are white colleagues. It's quite difficult to express your concerns to them. What else do you think we could do? Because most of us are on a visa. We have our COS where we had to probably work with the trust for like 2 years or if not more. And we can't just leave like that, like probably resign and go to another trust. Or could we just keep our peace, stay silent? And I don't know if there's anything else you would want to add.
Like I said, Sam, when you keep quiet, yes, it does keep the peace. However, if it's a persistent action or behavior that makes you anxious to come into work, that makes you depressed at work, that affects your concentration at work, I would say speak up. Now, the one thing I would stress is that if your managers are the one being racist, every manager has a manager.
That's correct.
Think about it.
Yeah.
So, if you have a manager that is being racist towards you, I always believe in one thing: speak to the person one on one first. Have a sit down. This is who I feel. What's going on? Have I done something that is made you behave this way? Is there something I can do better? As a manager, she should respond. And if you feel that this behavior is persistent even after that discussion, send an email, CC that manager, send it to our senior manager. Let them know that I've spoken to this person, this still persists. I would like this investigated. I would like this looked into. Because the one thing you have to be sure of is that any manager that doesn't want to be seen as being complicit will take action. And I'm not saying all our white colleagues are racist. Please don't get me wrong. Some of them are just reluctant to speak up because they don't want to be that person that is making the formal complaint against their own white colleagues. But if they really want to make a difference, they will speak up.
Thank you very much. I say, we have a question here. You say, what happens when one is bullied by a patient? Um, say I reported to the nurse in charge, who's an Asian, and emailed the manager, who's African, about the incident, but nothing was done about it, nor was I given feedback about it. I honestly gave up on speaking up about workplace issues, either from patients or colleagues, and I give you accolades for this.
Thank you. Now, it's a difficult position to be when you've spoken up and nothing is done. You've gone to your immediate manager and nothing has been done. And you've gone to a senior manager, nothing has been done. Listen, I've always said this, just like I just said previously. Every manager has a manager. If you take it up to the person above that person and they still haven't done anything about it, take it to HR. The reason why I'm saying this is this. A lot of trusts will say they have zero tolerance to racism, zero tolerance to bullying. If that is the case, then they should follow their own policy. There is a policy that should address a patient bullying a member of staff bullying another member of staff. There's a policy and there's a way to handle it. If it's not handled properly, then escalate it. I can understand that person's view of not wanting to speak up because no one is listening, no one is doing anything about it. Like I said, every time you speak up, you're speaking up because it is not a situation you want to find yourself. It's not a situation that you think should continue. But I think if you escalate it to HR, that is what they're for, to look into things like this. I think every trust will try to protect their reputation and not want to be put in a situation where the CQC will get involved, because anyone can go up to the CQC as well. So there's always someone to escalate to. If an incident gets to the HR, trust me, to be looked into, because the reputation of that trust is obviously on the line.
Thank you very much. I think what I take home here is that there's always someone to escalate to. Every manager has a manager. Always have that behind you. And if you go from your manager to the matron, nothing is done, please, you can take it up to the HR. Thank you very much, Kemi. I really appreciate your time and you sharing your personal experience with us today. I know recalling this experience might sometimes bring memories to you, but it's what we're happy is your tenacity to go through this and fight and come out victorious. And I know a lot of persons in this call are really motivated and inspired to see that one of our own has actually fought the fight against racism and has actually won. Thank you very much, Kemi, once again. And I hope sometime in the future we would see each other and talk more about it. Thank you very much. All right, everyone. I think without any much question, okay, I don't know if, how about a case of a colleague bullied by a fellow African colleague at work who keeps reporting me to management for offenses I did not commit? Sorry, that's coming in late. I was about to close the session.
No, that's fine. Sam, that's another kind of worms that if we start on that, we probably won't leave here today. A really wise lady recently said something on a forum, and I can relate and I agree with her. She gave an analogy of white crabs and black crabs in a bucket, where the white crabs, by the next day, had climbed out of the bucket, and the black crabs were still in the bucket fighting each other. That kind of represents the way we are to ourselves as ethnic minorities. And I'm putting all ethnic minority together. Black, white, Asian, doesn't matter. Eastern European, as long as you're a minority, I'm putting all of us in the same bucket. I think it's about time we start to look after each other rather than tearing each other down. There are several complaints that I've heard and I've witnessed where our own colleagues, our own Black colleagues, will try to pull us down. You're experiencing this bullying from your own kind is even more painful. And I'm sorry you have to go through that. But the honest truth is this. It doesn't matter if you're white or you're black. There's no reason for bullying. There's no reason to victimize a person in the workplace or anywhere else to be on that matter. I would suggest to this person who is experiencing this to take this forward and report this to the senior management team. If she's reported this to the senior management team and obviously nothing is being done, then I'll suggest for our own peace of mind, if she's able to move trust, move trust. Because there's a saying where I come from. The danger outside, if the danger outside doesn't kill you, the one inside would. Is the people in your inner circle, the people that you're actually supposed to be leaning on, that will actually cause you more harm. The NHS is so vast. I mean, I know it's an inconvenience sometimes to move from one trust to the other, but honestly, trust me, sometimes to actually protect your mental health, you might have to move. Don't be a victim to, I know it's difficult to say this to someone that is already experiencing it, but try not to be a victim. Pick yourself up, dust your shoes off, and move on. Let that person continue to do whatever they're doing until karma catches up with them. Because if you keep reporting to this person or that person and nothing is being done, then it's almost as if that person is being untouchable. If you decide to go to HR, it will be looked into definitely. But then it will now become a matter of you're black and black, we're pulling each other down. Why do that?
Thank you very much. And I hope that has really answered the question. Questions keep popping in now. This was actually said the last question. All right, the last question is a trigger. It is not even about racism now, it's about tribalism. How can we leave Nigeria and begin to speak our dialect in the changing rooms and reporting us to white managers? This is unacceptable and should be discouraged. Thank you, Kemi, for the lessons learned. I'm happy to say that to protect my mental health, I have moved trust, just waiting for my papers. I think that correlates to what you talked about the last questions. Thank you very much, everyone, and thank you for your time, everyone. And we hope to see you next month. And we have a very special and interesting topic to attend to next month. And thank you, Kemi, for your time. And I really appreciate you for joining us today and sharing your personal experience. Thank you very much. And I hope to see you guys next month. Thank you, Kemi.
Having me. I appreciate it.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone. All right, cheers. Thanks.
All right.
Bye.
Bye.